It's me, Aridas, Sergeant Colm Rashid. I'm an anthropologist, sociologist. Listen, there is a saying, if you want to know who rules over you, check where you're not allowed to criticize. I don't know who came up with that quote. It's a well-known quote amongst conspiracy theorists, also a well-known quote that's been used on memes. But I have another saying I come up with now to help you further. If you want to know the basis of your society, or better said, the community you're part of, check where you're not allowed to praise. Now, if you are in Europe or any part of the Western world, there's certain historical figures you better not praise. Think about Adolf Hitler. Why? Because it's obvious what he was part of and the harm it caused to the Western world. And there's still people alive today who have relatives who suffered enormously by what Adolf Hitler was involved with. You know what I mean? Or let's say you are in Eastern Europe and you find out some historical accomplishments of, let's say, Joseph Stalin. Well, Stalin was also involved in quite some harm. So in some of those Eastern European countries, praising Stalin is not a good idea. Now, the two examples I gave unto you, Joseph Stalin and Adolf Hitler, it's obvious why people are uncomfortable when you credit praise onto them. Did they do some good stuff while they were alive too? Yes, they did. But just because they did some good stuff too, does not mean automatically they were good people. And the good stuff they've done doesn't cancel out the enormous harm they caused onto generations to come. So, if you're in a place and there's certain historical figures people don't want to talk about, or they don't want you to give them praise, I can understand it. For example, if you go to Africa or to some of the Caribbean islands, some historical figures, for example, Christopher Columbus, people don't want him to get any praise either. Or some of the former colonizers or slave owners. So it's obvious that some historical figures are not meant to get praise in certain communities. Absolutely not. If you go to Korea, for example, I would not recommend you to give any praise to any historical Japanese figure, especially not of the early 20th century. Do your own research, you'll find out why. But apart from that, sometimes there are people, not even historical people who are alive today. When you even mention their name, people get quiet, or people frown, or people get uncomfortable. They change the topic, or they may even get upset with you and say, why you talk about that guy, why you talk about her? When you notice that there is an individual that's still alive, that nobody talks about, now you know what that community is founded upon. Let me explain. Let's say you go and visit your grandparents, and you also see the rest of your maternal family. They look at the pictures on the wall, and you see a family picture, and you see this one individual on the family picture. So you assume it's one of your aunties because your maternal grandparents had quite some children. So you ask about this girl that stands next to your mom. Ask, is that one of my auntie's mom? And your mom looks at it and your mom just ignores you. You ask your grandparents, they, oh, no, it was just a neighbor. But you think, okay, it's a bit weird. Why didn't my mom just answer my question when I asked, who's this? And why did my grandparents were so slow in saying it was a neighbor? And why would the neighbors, why would the child of the neighbors be on a family picture? And you know that the next day they removed the picture from the wall. And you think, okay, this is weird. So now you know that there's something your family is hiding. Long story short, you find out that this aunt of yours that you never knew about, nobody even told you about her existence, she disappeared. 25 years ago, before you were born. And her disappearance was quite suspicious. The circumstances were suspicious. And the more you dig into it, you realize that this woman was not liked by the community because she was known to call things out. And at some point, you have one of the locals telling you, you know, young man, don't look into this case. You love your family, right? You tell the local, yes, of course I love my family. Local tells you know what? Then it's better for you not to look further into this case because it's not going to do you well. Now, you at this point don't even want to know what happened at aunt anymore because you already realize once you find out, you'll never look at your family the same way again. So now you realize that your family, just from your mother's side, was based on avoiding responsibility and hiding whatever happened to that sibling. Whatever happened to that sibling, they're involved with it. That's why nobody wants to talk about it. And that picture was hanging on the wall was by mistake, because for the rest, they removed all evidence that his sibling even existed. What did his sibling do? But you don't even ask your mom about it, because when you ask who when you point to the picture on the wall, your grandparents' house, who is this? Your mother even respond to you. They already creeped you out. This is just a parable I gave on to you. But maybe you work at the company, okay? And there was a manager that just left just before you came to work there. But you notice that nobody talks about the previous manager anymore. Well, of course, he's not working there anymore. But you notice that anytime anyone mentions that previous manager, everyone gets quiet or everyone gets upset. And you think, oh, okay, something's off here. Look, anywhere you go, and there's certain people, folks, they want to see or they want to be mentioned, something is off. There's some conflict that's unresolved, or the public is involved in some type of crime. So if you want to know what type of community or organization you're dealing with, check where you're not allowed to praise. If you're not allowed to praise certain people, and you do your research, you find out, but there's nothing blameworthy or horrible about this individual, why the heck do so many people don't want to hear about this individual? Now you know that this was a scapegoat that got away. This individual was the community victim that people offloaded upon. And here's the issue. The individual decided they're not going to get along with society's restrictions. And you know, worldlings cannot handle it when you refuse the restrictions. So, because the individual got away, not gave in the restrictions, it is a big embarrassment onto the community. The community said no to this individual, and the individual just overruled their no and moved on without the community. And the individual are better off. This makes the community look bad. Or let's say people victimize this individual, and they went so far in victimizing this individual that they expose themselves. That can also happen. Anyway, this individual is controversial for a reason. The fact the individual is never mentioned, never invited to parties or to weddings, or maybe the individual is even living there still. It can also be the case. Maybe the individual is still living there. In the neighborhood, but nobody pays attention to the individual. Don't say hi to him or her. When people act like the individual that lives there doesn't exist. Let's say you move to an apartment complex, or let's say a flat complex, and you see there's someone living on the third floor, but everyone walks by that flat on the third floor like nobody lives there, even though someone is living there. And when the inhabitant gets out of the house, people just look the other way. You're going to think, is this a child molester? What is wrong that people treat this individual like this? Listen, often when such things happen, people tend to brush it off, say, I don't want to get involved, I want to be left alone. No. Once you notice that someone is controversial, you can't mention them, nor point towards them in a conversation without people getting upset with you, acting out against you, or turning silent, or change the subject. Or when you notice that the individual is ignored on purpose by the locals, ask yourself what the heck is going on. If you don't do that, you become part of what goes on over there. and you end up blameworthy for all the bad consequences do. Simple as that. Well, that's it for now. Keep increasing Christ, and remember, wherever you go, check where you're not allowed to praise. Oh, and by the way, haven't you noticed in society you can praise any deity? Any deity you can praise except Christ Jesus. That shows you what you're dealing with. Be at peace.